My name is Emily Davis. I'm 32. We learn to keep score in families the same way you learn to read. By accident, by repetition, and by the way people hand you crumbs instead of meals. My parents' house sits 10 minutes from mine. Small bricks, polite curtains, the kind of place where everyone knows which seat is theirs. Nathan, my younger brother, fits in the seat that matters. He has the easy smile, the stories that make waiters laugh, the gravitational pull that bends every conversation toward him. When he walks into a room, it feels like a small festival has arrived. For him, everything is almost about to pop off. For me, things are almost over, only if I let them be. Paul nudged my elbow as we pulled into the street. He had tied his hair back to go shorter than usual, a little rumple at his crown. He's a carpenter by trade and a patient man by temperament. The kind of person who packs extra screws and thinks through a problem out loud until it's solved. We met when I was 25. We married in a tiny ceremony a year later. Mia, our daughter, is 5 and fills every pocket she has with stickers, ticket stubs, and folded notes that say for Daddy. She is a small, serious collector of tiny treasures. If anyone asked, we'd look like a normal family. The holidays, the fights over nothing, the ordinary love. But my family measures love in ledgers. Who lent what, who showed up, whose name carries weight at the bank. 2 weeks before that Saturday, Mom called. "Come early," she said. "We'll celebrate." "Celebrate what?" I asked. "Family," she said, "and Nathan's big pitch." I hummed and agreed. Paul looked at me while I rinsed a plate. "You sure?" he asked. He said it the way he always does, quietly protective, already imagining Plan B. "It's just dinner," I told him. We took pastries from a nicer bakery, folded them into the box like contraband, and strapped Mia into her yellow dress with the little bow she insists on wearing as if it were an emblem. Inside, the house smelled like gravy, hot polish, and the strange perfume of expectation. Balloons, a banner, the whiteboard in the dining room with numbers and arrows, family first, in Nathan's neat block letters. Mom greeted us with a hug that never actually reaches her hands. She was all smiles for the camera, all calculations for the ledger. On the entry table were name tags, small rectangular pieces of paper with people's names and titles. Mom, Dad, Nathan, Jess, Uncle Ray. Then the one that hit me, MIA, limited guest. I blinked, thinking it was a joke. Paul's jaw went taut at my side. "Limited?" he mouthed. Mom laughed it off, a sound that wanted forgiveness before it had earned it. "We're doing half portions under 6, she said. "It's logistics." Nathan leaned in like he was sharing a secret and whispered loud enough for his boys to hear. "That means no food." They laughed as if it were clever. The room folded around the joke. Bright laughter, the kind that leaves small cuts. Mia touched the tag like a child trying to read a label written in a language she's been told is important. Her fingers curled. Her face went small. I felt something hot and metallic shift under my ribs, not the explosive kind of anger that makes scenes, but a quiet, clean kind of disgust. The part of me that had been saying, "It's fine," ran out of batteries that day. It didn't start with a name tag. Any long resentment begins as smaller sums. I co-signed Nathan's first car at 22 because his credit was thin and he promised to refinance. He didn't. I paid late fees for him because Mom said the bank doesn't accept family stories. Later, when he flitted from idea to idea, fitness app, meal kits, hybrid community experiences, he'd send me the deck at midnight and ask me to clean this up. I edited his grammar, fixed the numbers, smoothed the promises into something an investor might not hate. I wired money as if generosity were a currency that could be spent and returned. My spreadsheet grew like a tumor. Dates, amounts, just till Friday, promises that slid like jelly. The numbers crossed thresholds, 8,000, 12,000, then 17,640, and no one used the word extraction. They used family. At the table, Nathan told the story about selling a snow cone to a snowman when he was 6, and everyone laughed, like that fact alone explains why he deserves more of the world. He clicked a marker at the whiteboard. "We have an angel investor," he said. "We just need the family round to show momentum. 30 today locks a better match." He looked at me and smiled in the way that said I was already part of the collateral. "You're the cornerstone," he said. "We talked about it." My thumb traced the rim of my glass. My mind ran through receipts like a prayer. Pediatric visits at 2 in the morning. Gas, rent, daycare. Nights when I moved money from the grocery account to a bridge because his exposure sounded plausible and my daughter needed shoes. The tag on Mia's chest sat crooked and ridiculous. The whiteboard arrows were pointed at me like a drain. No. The word left me without melodrama, but with a capital finality I'd never used. The room did that small wobble that happens before someone drops something heavy. Mom blinked. Dad made a hollow sound like a cough. Nathan laughed as if I were acting in a play he'd written. "You're kidding," he said. I wasn't. Paul stepped forward for the first time that night, voice level and deliberate. "She's 5, he said. "She eats dinner." It was the only argument that needed to be made. Mom said she could eat at home. Dad said, "Don't make a scene." Nathan smirked and called me theatrical. Lena, the voice in my head, who would have been an easier target, didn't exist. Paul steadied me like an anchor. I took a plate regardless. Chicken, rice, salad, 2 strawberries grabbed from the prime bowl. I walked it to Mia like a small rebellion. Their faces moved from amusement to anger quickly, as if someone had switched the room's channel. Mom said if I couldn't support my brother, maybe this wasn't the place for me. Dad barked that I was being childish. Nathan offered a path back. Apologize. Wire money. Be on the cap table later. He spread his hands like the patriarch of a startup family. I wrote one word on the back of Mia's tag. No. We left before the speech that would have made me sound like the villain. No shouting. No slam. Paul buckled Mia in the car, and we drove toward a diner with cracked leather booths and a waitress who called everyone Hun. Mia ate waffles with strawberries that belonged to no tier. My phone vibrated in my pocket, an animal rattling the cage. The family group chat lit up like a slot machine. Texts, missed calls, prayers, demands, threats. "Wire 10K by noon, or I erase you from the cap table and from my life," Nathan wrote in a message that read like a dare. Back at home that night, after the bedtime book and the way her hair smells when she sleeps, I took the shoebox from the closet. Sticker. Tiny folded note. Ticket stub. I added Mia's newest sticker and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I opened the spreadsheet I had kept as an apology and a record. I paused at lines I had blurred into kindness. I opened our banking app. I created new sub-accounts labeled House, Emergency, MIA. I changed passwords. I canceled recurring transfers with names that weren't ours. When the ledger in my head quieted, something else sounded. Not triumph, but relief. Someone I loved had called me selfish that evening. I thought about jobs that don't ask you to pay for a sibling's life, and about a daughter who once touched a name tag and registered it as worth. I let my hand shake as I clicked save and felt, for the first time in a long while, that my generosity was no longer for sale. The next days felt like an animal testing the edges of a new fence, curious, then insistent, then aggressive. The family chat became a machine that turned panic into prose. My phone pulsed with demand and disappointment. "You embarrassed us. Think about the children. Wire 10K by noon. You're making a mistake." There was a rhythm to the pressure, first loud, then softer, then legal sounding, as if they were trying different voices to find the one that would make me bend. Paul watched me scroll while he chopped vegetables. He says things like, "Breathe," in that slow way that asks my shoulders to unhook. We had gone through the list like strategists: savings, daycare, the emergency fund that only ever felt emergency when someone else asked us to fill it. He sat at the counter with a notebook and a pen and laid it between us like a small altar. "Okay," he said, "if we stop playing their games, what do we want instead?" I wrote out things we had learned to call tiny and holy: predictable mornings, no 2 a.m. dread, a savings account that answers to our name. He drew a line and titled the top of the page U.S. The act of writing felt smaller than a revolution, but firmer than a promise whispered in the dark. Their pressure shifted strategies. The first storm was fury. The second, mansplaining. By the third day, they had adopted the weapon of helplessness. Think about Mia. Mom switched to soft edges, calling at breakfast with a voice that tried to stitch us back. We didn't mean to shame her, she said. I thought it was cute. I listened to the way her words slid sideways from apology to excuse and felt the old habit of giving in like a muscle twitch. I did not answer that first call. I let it ring to voicemail where she left a message about family and heritage and how we all had to pull together. Then a letter came, a paper with a bank logo like an accusation, a loan that I had co-signed at 22. Nathan's first car, the one he said he'd refinance, had gone 90 days delinquent. I had, somewhere in the past, forgotten that my name lived on that paper. The notice demanded action. My chest tightened in a familiar way. Not the hot anger of a flare, but the slow, clinical pressure of someone who has to choose which accounts to save and which promises to let sink. I drove to my parents' house with my hands on the steering wheel as if I could steer the conversation to calmer water. I left Mia with Paul, who kissed her temple and promised pancakes. I told myself I was going to be practical, to untie a knot I had tied when I was 22 and thought my brother's charm would mature into responsibility. Dad opened the door with a raised eyebrow I could read in the dark like a ledger. Inside, Nathan sat on the couch, scrolling his phone. He didn't look up. I need the car paperwork, I said. Now. He kept scrolling. You're dead to me, remember? He said without looking up, like a replayed line that never landed. Release my name then, I said. He laughed, the same oversized laugh that had gotten him free drinks and second chances. Do your worst, he said, as if daring me to be practical. I called the bank from their driveway. The clerk's voice on the line did not have family history on it. She had policy and options. None of them were free. I chose the one that hurt my wallet least, but my pride most. I paid the delinquent amount, removed myself as co-signer, and felt a lock click inside me in the manner of a gate closing, loud and final. I texted Nathan a terse confirmation. Done. He replied with a middle finger emoji. I stared at the little black symbol and felt like information had been delivered rather than emotion. The middle finger was the punctuation of a relationship that had been skewed for years. That night we ate pasta. Simple, too much sauce. Garlic toast that charred around the edges. Mia fell asleep mid-sentence, her thumb in her mouth, stickers spilling from her pockets like small, secret currencies. My phone sat face down on the counter, and for the first time in years, I didn't worry about the sound it might make. The quiet felt like a new room with a locked door. But silence is a two-headed animal. It can be balm, or it can be the space where plans hatch. 2 weeks later, the quiet cracked with a different sound. An email from a lender, not about the car, with numbers I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped into week-old coffee. I drove to the library, sat under fluorescent bulbs, and opened the spreadsheet because some habits are hard to bury. There, like a fossil, was a memo in Nathan's handwriting that had always felt off to me. A line item, coaching, $12,200, crossed with another, marketing, $1,200. Same date, same amount, but only one payment recorded as coming from family funds. The math didn't feel like mistake. It felt like design. I started looking back through old receipts, transfers from our account that had lit up the night before a group meeting. Small help, payback after the round. Payments that coincided with big displays. A borrowed watch and a family photo. A dinner where Nathan's kids had open gifts while Mia got a coloring book. The ledger didn't only track money, it tracked a pattern. When display mattered, the family bank came out. When need was private, the bank closed. The revelation buried itself not as a twist of fury, but as a precise, hard sadness. I had been part of a system where my generosity was the oil that kept someone else's public machine turning. I told Paul, and his jaw hardened in the way it does when too many practical things rally one feeling. We can choose, he said. We can stop pretending. Allie came in the most human of ways, an Aunt Cheryl text that was not a prayer and not a demand, but a question. Are you okay? It read. It was brief and human, and when I called her, she answered with a softness that held a ledger of her own. I see things, she said quietly. Sometimes family hurts because they don't know better. If you need witnesses, I am tired of watching. It was not a rescue, it was a mirror. Jess, Nathan's wife, had lowered her phone and not joined the chorus at dinner. Later, at a backyard barbecue where the water in the kiddie pool glowed pink from the sunset, she slipped me a sidelong look that might have been apology or might have been calculation. "It's messy," she said, voice small. "I didn't know how to stop it." I took the words like rain. They tried guilt later, softer, more surgical. "If you don't support Nathan, don't expect help when you need it," Dad's text said. He tried the classic pivot, morality to leverage. Mom suggested I come by Sunday, that we talk it out. It was an invitation disguised as an interrogation. I did not go. I made pancakes at home with Paul and Mia, and we ate together at the table that belonged only to us. The ledger on the kitchen counter remained open until the numbers stared back, calm and unromantic. Then the escalation that felt both petty and professional arrived. Nathan began to scrub me from the narrative publicly. He posted in a mutual group that I had bailed and that the family would proceed without dead weight. It was shorthand for removal. They replaced my face with a phrase. People reacted with thumbs up emoji, as if erasing a person was a matter of convenience. I kept my phone off that day, walked the neighborhood with Mia on my shoulders, and felt the sunlight temper the sting. One night, late, I found a message in the spreadsheet. A memo line that I had circled without remembering doing it. PR optics. Make public feed look balanced. Underneath was a shorthand I didn't recognize. J. Foster, limit. Show token participation. The words were like a small knife. Someone had written the strategy to make my daughter's presence a detail on someone else's billboard. I showed the line to Paul, his face folded in a way that hurt. "This is more than money," he said. "It's reputation. They were curating you out." The thought sat in my chest like a stone. If my name and my child's tag were part of rehearsed optics, then the kindness I had been giving had been currency in a theater I didn't know I'd been part of. It set a new course in me. I could expose them, scream ledger lines loud in the place where their investors listened. I could file legal things, make it official, make it ugly. Or I could do something quieter and more final, separate the accounts, the names, the phone numbers, and the narrative that allowed them to place me on a shelf labeled support. That night I chose both in small measures. I took a printout of the ledger, copied the odd memos into a folder, and saved the file in 3 places. I texted Aunt Cheryl, "If I make this public, will you stand with me?" She answered only with a heart and the words, "Whenever." The week closed with a small victory and the taste of what would be lost. I had paid the bank notice, cut the recurring transfers, and created rules for money that had my name on it. But I had also opened a door to something else, the possibility that my family's loyalty was contingent, that love had been defined as leverage. The next step, I felt, would not be a ledger or a phone call. It would be exposure or exile. The choice was mine, and it was terrible, and it felt like beginning. The morning I decided to go public, the world looked annoyingly ordinary. Sunlight came through the blinds in stripes, Mia's cereal spilled in perfect loops, and Paul's voice hummed through the hallway as he packed her lunch. Everything was calm, deceptively so, like the quiet before you press send. I'd been drafting the message for days. Not a rant, not an accusation, just facts, cold and documented. I kept rewriting it, trying to find a tone that didn't sound bitter, but still left a bruise. I wanted people to see the machinery behind the family's golden image, the unpaid debts, the manipulated optics, the selective kindness that functioned like PR. When Paul left for work, I opened my laptop. The spreadsheet waited like a confession that had already decided to speak. I scrolled to the line that had started it all. J. Foster, limit, show token participation. That phrase had lived rent-free in my head for weeks, whispering every time someone said, "It wasn't that serious," or "You're overreacting." Now I wanted the whisper to become thunder. The post I finally wrote was simple. For years, I thought family meant forgiveness. Then I found out it meant funding. Here are the receipts. Every gift I gave that became a demand. Every loan that turned into silence. To those who were told I abandoned them, look closer. I just stopped paying to belong. I attached screenshots, cropped, dated, redacted where necessary, not out of spite, but clarity. Then I hit post. It took exactly 7 minutes for the explosion to start. First came the comments, cautious, curious, confused. Then came the backlash, sharp and coordinated. Nathan called it defamation. Mom messaged, "How could you embarrass your father like this?" Dad's text was worse. "You've made enemies, don't come home." That word, home, stung more than I expected, as if I'd burned a physical place, not just the illusion of one. By noon, the post had 1,000 shares. Some strangers applauded the bravery, others accused me of betrayal. A few family friends messaged quietly, confessing they'd seen the same behavior for years, but were too scared to say anything. And Aunt Cheryl, bless her, commented publicly, "Truth isn't disloyalty, it's overdue accounting." That one line became a quote, reposted everywhere. It gave me cover, and something like relief. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt electric, the air full of aftershock. Paul held me, whispering, "You did what needed to be done." But I kept thinking about Mia, about the stories she'd hear one day, the way people rewrite truth into legend if you don't stay ahead of the edit. The next morning, a manila envelope waited in our mailbox. No return address. Inside, a printed copy of my post, annotated in red pen, with phrases circled and notes like, "Check with legal," and "potential damages." At the bottom, a typed line, "Cease and desist or face litigation." No signature, no name, but I knew whose language that was. Dad didn't send letters, he sent signals. Paul looked at the paper and let out a slow whistle. "They're trying to scare you," he said. "They're trying to buy silence," I corrected. We took the document to a friend of his, a corporate lawyer who owed him a favor. She read the pages, eyebrows rising and falling like punctuation marks. "Empty threat," she said, "but document everything. Don't delete a word." I didn't delete, I doubled down. I compiled every payment record, every bank transfer, every time the family chat shifted from love to loan request. And when the lawyer asked, "What's your end goal?" I surprised myself with the answer, "I don't want their money back. I want my name clean." She smiled, small and knowing. That's more dangerous. The following week, my parents hosted what they called a family reconciliation dinner. Aunt Cheryl texted, "They want to control the narrative. Don't go alone." So Paul came with me. When we arrived, the air smelled like lemon polish and theater. Nathan stood by the window, drink in hand, wearing the smirk of a man rehearsing his victory speech. Mom greeted us like a hostess managing an event, not a mother bridging a wound. Dad didn't hug me. He handed me a printed agreement, a piece of paper that outlined conditions for peace. Delete all posts. Issue a public apology. Return family documents. No further discussion in public forums. It ended with, "In exchange, the family will release you from any outstanding obligations." Paul laughed before I could. "Release her? From what you stole?" Dad's eyes hardened. "You've said enough, son." "I haven't even started," Paul replied. The silence that followed was thick and calculated. A silence meant to push me into choosing comfort over conviction. But comfort had already cost me too much. I folded the paper, tore it neatly in half, and placed it back on the table. "Consider this my signature," I said. Nathan muttered, "You're doing this for attention." I looked at him, the boy who had once promised to protect me from bullies and ended up becoming one. "No," I said. "I'm doing this so my daughter won't have to." Mom's lip trembled. "Emily, please, we're still family." I stood up. "Then act like it." And with that, we left. The fallout came in waves. First, the gossip. Then the silence. Then something unexpected. Respect. People I hadn't heard from in years. Ex-colleagues, old neighbors, messaged quietly, telling me they'd read my story and finally understood their own. One woman wrote, "You put words to the way my family keeps score. I thought I was crazy. Turns out I was just the accountant." That message made me cry harder than the hate ever could, because that's what the story had become, not revenge, but resonance. Weeks later, I drove past my parents' house. The lights were on, but the curtains drawn. I didn't stop. I just slowed down long enough to see Nathan's car in the driveway. The same one I'd paid off years ago. It gleamed under the streetlight, immaculate and hollow. In the rearview mirror, my daughter's reflection met mine. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Are we still going to Grandma's for Christmas?" I took a deep breath. "No, sweetheart," I said. "We're making our own Christmas this year." She smiled, as if that sounded better. And for the first time in my life, it did. That night, after Mia was asleep, I opened my ledger one last time. Not the spreadsheet, the real one. The ledger of memory, the invisible book that tallied every give and take. I drew a final line beneath all the names. Next to mine, I wrote one word: paid. Then I closed it for good. The morning after our departure from my parents' house, our apartment felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. The quiet was no longer hollow. It was space. Space for decisions that didn't need permission. Space for a life measured in joy, not obligation. Mia was at the kitchen counter, stacking her tiny figurines with meticulous concentration. "Mom, look, they're having a meeting." Her innocent mimicry of adult dynamics made me laugh. I poured coffee for Paul, who sat rubbing his temples, still stunned by the previous night's confrontation. "I never thought I'd see the day," he said, eyes on mine. "Me neither," I admitted. "But it feels lighter." We spent that day creating a new rhythm: laundry folded without guilt, breakfast that wasn't rationed, phone left aside. Every moment reinforced that we were untangling decades of expectations and replacing them with choice. And yet the past had a way of sneaking in. 2 days later, a letter arrived in our mailbox. This one official. A lawyer's letter from my parents' attorney. Cease and desist all public statements and remove all digital postings. Legal action will be pursued immediately, if ignored. Paul looked at me, grim. "They won't stop." "I know," I said, "and I'm not going to let them." We called our lawyer. She suggested we prepare for a fight, to document everything. I agreed, not out of anger, but necessity. Our story wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Mia. About showing her what it meant to stand firm, even when the people who should love you unconditionally try to control the narrative. Weeks passed. The tension lingered like a shadow in the hallways of our life. Emails, messages, and calls came in a predictable rhythm. Threats disguised as advice, guilt disguised as concern. But for the first time, I didn't respond. I watched. I noted. I learned. Mia, blissfully unaware, thrived. Her laughter became a soundtrack that covered over the buzzing phones. Paul and I built routines that were ours alone. Bedtime stories without judgment. Pancakes without commentary. Bedtime kisses without strings attached. And then came an unexpected twist, an outreach from my extended family. Not my parents, not Nathan, but distant cousins and old family friends who had witnessed the pattern for years. They wanted to talk, not to apologize, but to confirm what I already knew. I wasn't crazy. The ledger I kept wasn't obsessive, it was clarity. One cousin, Elaine, said quietly over coffee, "We never said anything because we didn't want to get involved. But seeing you do this, it's like a dam breaking. I finally understand what was happening all those years." It was vindication, but a quiet human one. Not triumphal, not loud. Christmas approached. For the first time, we didn't consider visiting my parents. Instead, we created our own traditions. Mia decorated a tree that wasn't curated for appearances. She baked cookies that didn't have to be perfect. Paul wrapped gifts with handwritten notes. I hung lights with an offbeat rhythm. That night, as we sat by the fire, Mia whispered, "Mom, this is the best Christmas ever." And it was. I realized then that freedom didn't come from fighting the past. It came from building a life that didn't answer to it. Every choice I made, from rejecting the demands to walking away, was a brick in the foundation of a new family. Then came the email I didn't expect, a tentative apology from Mom. "Emily, I don't know if you'll ever forgive us. I see now that we were wrong to pressure you. I hope Mia's happiness shows you that. Mom." I read it twice. My chest tightened, but not in anger. Forgiveness was optional. Recognition, however, was necessary. I didn't reply immediately. I let the email sit, the weight of it balanced against the life I had built. Paul squeezed my hand. "Do you want to reply?" "I'll wait," I said. "Time will tell what kind of conversation we're ready for." By January, the tension had begun to fade. The family fund messages had stopped, the legal threats were quiet, and our life resumed its own cadence. Mia thrived in her kindergarten class, bringing home stories and artwork without the shadow of a seating chart. Paul got a promotion, one unconnected to family influence, and I focused on work that was mine, projects where my name alone mattered. I looked back only rarely. When I did, it wasn't bitterness that filled me. It was clarity. Every ledger, every slight, every demand had led to this moment of autonomy. One evening, as Mia fell asleep, I wrote in my journal, "The past can be a ghost, but it no longer haunts us. We choose our life, our family, and our happiness, and we protect it fiercely." I closed the journal. The air smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. Paul leaned against me, and for the first time, I didn't feel the pull of old debts, emotional or financial. We were free, and I knew, without doubt, that the ledger of my life would now be written by me.